this time of year, so to get 19 or 20 is pretty warm indeed. Now through Saturday evening, a few bits and pieces of cloud will float around at times, but for most places it stays dry and clear. Notice this mass of cloud though across the North Sea. That's low cloud and fog, and that'll start to drift its way in across eastern areas, turning things grey and misty as we start Sunday morning. So a bit of a different feel here, but still clear skies out to the west and still the risk of some frost first thing on Sunday. Through Sunday then, a bit of a different picture across eastern areas of England, eastern Scotland as well. Much more cloud, a greyer picture here, and a bit more of a breeze across the southeast, making it feel quite chilly. But elsewhere, plenty of sunshine. We keep the dry weather into the start of next week, but it will begin to turn a bit colder by the middle of the week. Bye-bye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is writer and broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. President Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan with the EU to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. The US will provide the European Union with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. Speaking in Brussels, President Biden said the EU shouldn't be subsidising Putin's brutal attack on Ukraine.
I know that eliminating Russian gas will have costs for Europe, but it's not only the right thing to do from a moral standpoint, it's going to put us on a much stronger strategic footing.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg warns that Russia may be trying to create a pretext for the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine.
Any use of chemical weapons or nuclear weapons will totally change the nature of the war in Ukraine. It will be absolutely unacceptable, and it will be a blatant violation of international law.
Well, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says a humanitarian corridor will be opened out of the besieged city of Mariupol today for those with access to a vehicle. Tens of thousands of civilians are believed to be trapped with little food, water, medicine, power or heat. 300 people were reportedly killed when Russia bombed a theatre sheltering women and children in Mariupol last week. The UN Refugee Agency says around 3.7 million people have now fled Ukraine since the conflict began. The British Ministry of Defence says Ukraine has reoccupied towns and defensive positions up to 21 miles east of the capital, Kiev. It also says in the south, Russian forces heading to Odessa are being slowed by logistical problems and Ukrainian resistance. Alexander Nosachenko is a Ukrainian businessman turned soldier. He told us why he's fighting on the front line.
What happens to those who cannot escape, who have no means to travel or to immigrate to Europe? Those will be ultimately killed by Russians. That's crystal clear. And then the big question mark was, why was I doing this, training for all these 6 years? Probably for the moment like this.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the Taliban's decision to close schools to girls in Afghanistan is unjustifiable. The UK, US and Canada, along with representatives of the European Union, have condemned the decision in a joint statement. They say denying their right to an education contradicts the Taliban's previous assurances. Nargis Nahan is a former Afghan politician. She told GB News there are millions of girls living as prisoners in the country.
Living, you don't know what you're living for. You're not treated as a human being anymore. You don't have access to the very, very basic rights. Even for small decisions such as going to the doctor, you have to have a mail company. So as a human being, you don't have any independency. You don't have any freedom. You cannot earn for yourself. You cannot decide for yourself. And the future seems very dark and bleak, and you don't see anybody around trying to help you out.
Well, back here, the Transport Secretary has called for the resignation of the P&O Ferries chief executive. That's after Peter Hebblethwaite admitted he should have consulted unions before sacking 800 workers without notice. They're being replaced with cheaper agency staff. Coronavirus infections have risen sharply across most of the UK, with over 4.2 million people likely to have had the infection last week. The steep rise is being driven by the Omicron BA2 variant, a more transmissible form of Omicron. The number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has set a record high for the 5th day in a row. Northern Ireland is the only nation where infections are believed to be falling. Meanwhile, in Wales, more than 1,400 people have been admitted to hospital with COVID, the highest number of admissions in over a year. First Minister Mark Drakeford has announced that the legal requirement to wear a face covering in shops and on public transport will end on Monday, as well as self-isolation after a positive COVID test.
The rapid spread of infections caused by BA2 means that we need to retain some of these protections in law for a little while longer. And at the same time, we will continue to issue authoritative advice to help people take those steps which protect us all.
Well, you're up to date. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Look into the eyes, not around the eyes, into the eyes you're under. The spell of fiscal illusionist Rishi Sunak. In one hand he giveth, in the other he taketh awayeth. If you're not watching closely, you'll miss the trick. His spring statement is already falling apart. I mean, how stupid does he think we are? Pretty much everyone loses out, even those he's purporting to help. Despite his claims to be delivering the biggest net cut to personal taxes in over a quarter of a century, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, or IFS, who know their stuff, said that nearly all workers would end up paying more on their earnings. Hardly an example of true conservatism. His plans will mean that the last time tax rises as a proportionate of income were this high was after the Second World War, when Clement Attlee, the leader of the Labour Party, was Prime Minister. Rishi offered tax breaks for those who have enough money to afford buying ridiculously expensive solar panels and heat pumps. Can anyone here afford to buy any of those? I know I can't. He took off 5 pence from a litre of fuel, a saving that many forecourts still have yet to pass on, whilst the oil companies that own them boast of their billion-dollar profits. Rishi left pensioners being taxed a 55% rate when withdrawing their savings. So what's the point of even saving for a pension if you lose over half of it when you come to take it out? In the right hand, true to his word, he cut taxes, but in the left, he increased them, raising the floor for national insurance contributions. And to make this bitter pill taste better, he promised an income tax cut in 2024. But what's that got to do with now? Judging by the response he's received, he might be adding the art of invisibility to his box of tricks. I mean, who's to say he'll even be in the job as Chancellor then? To show his empathy, though, he set up a photo call as he filled up a reasonably priced car at a petrol station. Clearly not his. Turns out he borrowed the car from an employee there. I suspect he was trying to create the illusion of normality and that he's just like the rest of us. Sadly, the veil slipped when he came to pay for it, as it became clear he didn't really know what he was doing. I mean, how many billionaires do you know that drive a Kia? In fact, how many billionaires do you know? His spring statement was so bad that one could only determine that perhaps billionaire Rishi Sunak doesn't live in the real world like the rest of us, and frankly, hasn't got a clue. During the pandemic, he set up the job retention scheme, which left out millions of self-employed people. There was Eat Out to help out COVID. And in November 2020, it transpired that he failed to declare a significant amount of his wife and family's financial interests on the Register of Ministers' Interests, including a combined £1.7 billion shareholding in the Indian company Infosys, a company set up by her father and is still trading in Russia, despite his government calling on others to stop. Dishy Rishi, a dish best served cold. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Each Friday at 5 o'clock, I put the focus on a particular guest or a subject matter, and today I'll ask, will cutting VAT on household energy efficiency measures like heat pumps, solar panels and insulation make you install them? The Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced the cut to VAT on items in this spring statement, but will it really make it affordable? The Great British Debate this hour. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have left Jamaica after a difficult couple of days, which saw strained relationships between the monarchy and Britain's former colonies. Their visit sparked protests from those campaigning for compensation from the UK for the riches earned from the slave trade. And the Prime Minister of Jamaica hinted he no longer wanted Her Majesty the Queen to be the head of the country. So I'm asking, could this be the end of the monarchy as we know it? And a new birth control pill for men. Yes, it's been found to be 99% effective in preventing pregnancy in tests on mice. We'll discuss that before 5 o'clock. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome to my panel. Writer and broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. So hello and welcome. Oh, I like that blue that you're wearing. It's very nice. You and I, we look good together because
we're pastel.
We're pastel. Whereas these, what a pineapple. Pastel pineapple.
Sun is shining in the sky.
It is, yes.
I decided to brighten up the studio because it may not last for many days.
Oh, well, yeah, the sun, not you.
Definitely not me.
So, John, what do you think? I mean, look, we heard Rishi Sunak. He's come up with all this wonderful so-called magic trick that seems to be sort of unbalanced because nothing's really going anywhere, but everything seems to be heavier on the side of us, the general public. But what's your view?
Well, he's like a magician, isn't he, at the end of the Pier show, in a really dreadful magician. I was going to say like Paul Daniels, but Paul Daniels was at least funny. And when he said, "You're going to like this," not a lot, you actually did. Whereas Rishi Sunak, I didn't like it at all. His halo has dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he spent money like a lottery winner on speed during the COVID thing, and it was necessary in places. You know, I'm not going to totally slag him or Boris. But now what's needed is some idea how to kickstart the economy.
Yeah.
And I think the way you kickstart the economy is you leave more money in people's back pocket, so they get spending. By them getting spending, it boosts the economy. We've got loads of jobs at the moment. The hospitality sector, they need more help at the moment as well. Yeah. Then you get people drinking, spending, eating. That helps things.
That helps to drive it. It keeps the footfall. It gets everything going. But what do you think, Joanne? Because a lot of people say that he's actually detached from reality in many senses and what the general public will be dealing with, because he is ultimately married to a billionaire. And if you look at his back catalogue of the jobs he's done, he's been he's worked in hedge funds, and he went to, I think it was Oxford, wasn't it, and all this. So it's like, is he somebody who's connected with us, and is this why his budget is so detached?
Well, I mean, he's clearly not connected with people on that level, but in a sense that shouldn't matter. It doesn't preclude him necessarily from making the right economic decisions. I think what's happened here is that he's caught between trying to be, playing a bit of a clever political game. And obviously we know about all the shenanigans within the Conservative Party, and he may very well have his eye on an imminent leadership election, but also, what is right to do for the economy. And I think, actually, you're right to say his halo has slipped, because he doesn't seem to have played either of those things, either the economics of this or the politics of it, very adeptly. And I think it's left an awful lot of people saying, well, this just isn't adequate for the size of the problems economically that we're facing. And there were certain things, there were certain things that he perhaps could have done. I mean, I don't want to take away from, I think, what was a good move, which is raising the thresholds on NIs, because that was focused. Yeah, well, because that is focused on the lower income section of the economy. But perhaps he should have gone back to basics and gotten rid of that rise altogether, which a lot of Conservatives.
I think he should have got rid of it. But John, what do you?
Well, what I can't stand is he's just stood there in a photo opportunity filling up a Kia. He didn't even know how to pay for it when he went in the garage. I'm fed up with politicians like him being hypocrites and acting as if they're one of us. Rishi, you ain't one of us, and you're never going to be one of us. If that doesn't mean you can't become a great Prime Minister. Boris isn't exactly one of us. Stop playing us for fools. I'd have rather seen Dishy plugging in his Tesla, which is probably what he drives. Let's just be straight.
I don't even think he drives it. It's somebody else.
Well, somebody else does. But it's the whole idea that he's penalised, actually, people who don't just drive those Kias, and that was a brand new one by the look of it. It's people who drive second-hand cars. He's penalising the poor again, and he's looking after his rich mates. We
will talk more about the detail of that as well, because we'll be looking into inflation and all the sort of things that are creating that. And I think some of his policies are the reason why we have such high inflation at the moment, and that should be questioned. But what I'd like to see is, and I remember years ago there used to be this programme where the politicians were forced to live like all of us. I would like to see him, and I challenge him, Rishi, if you're watching now, if you ever do get wind of this show, I challenge you, Rishi, to live like the rest of us. I think he should be given the basic income that he's given everybody else, and he should be forced to live for a week like that, and we see how well he gets on, to see if he thinks his policies are realistic. I know he's a billionaire, so I'm not saying that he can't work out how people live, but what I'm saying is that he actually doesn't have any affinity with how people live. And I think that's why his policies are so detached.
But his second PR stunt was, when he was asked on radio the second day after that, he did know the price of a loaf of bread. Chris Evans started that by asking politicians. And also what you were talking about, that Matthew Parris, who's now a columnist for the Times, when he was an MP, he was asked to live up north, I think somewhere near where you come from, for a week on the normal money. He couldn't do it. After 2 days, he was climbing up the wall. And that's the problem with politicians.
I think this kind of thing is a bit gimmicky, to be honest.
Well, if he's prepared to do a gimmick,
but quite. I agree with you about that. But I don't. In a sense, I think that if he'd been successful this week in terms of the economic measures, we wouldn't be sitting here saying, you know, what dreadful photo opportunity, you know, put him on
And to be
reality
fair, he had a
TV.
hell of a job, didn't he, Joe, after COVID? He has got a hell of a job, just like Boris.
But he could have improved
Partly
it.
of his own making, it has to be said.
Yeah,
but,
and I mean, look, he left millions of people who like had literally no income. I don't know what he thought they would have. So some people, they couldn't, because they fell through the gaps of what he put down for benefits. And that were millions of people. It wasn't
3
just
million.
like, it was like 3 million. If it had been, say, maybe a couple of 100,000, then you can sort of work out how maybe he could compensate for that. But 3 million people.
There wasn't really a big idea
What did he
here,
think
was there?
those people would live off? You know, and I think that's where he lacks the connection, because he's obviously got other things. He's got this, he's got that. Oh, well, if I haven't got income, I don't think he understands.
I think we're going to hear more from him in the coming weeks, and I think there will be, if not a U-turn, some kind of additional statement.
I was one of those 3 million, just done my accounts. I'm completely knackered financially now as a result of it. I fell through, believe it or not, those gaps.
Never. Were they that big?
They were big gaps. he didn't understand, and you know what's worse? He didn't care. And it's those 3 million people...
Well, I don't know whether you could say he didn't care, because we don't know what he thinks.
Okay, those 3
knows?
million people, they're some of the backbone of this country. The plumbers, the chippies, whatever, white van man, white van woman. And also, he can't justify his wife having all that money in a firm that's still in Russia. If the rest of us have to get out of Russia, he should be out.
Well, I mean, you know, obviously it's not him. Obviously, it's not him directly, but then he is married to somebody. And if it were, you know, like if you divorce somebody, you're married to them, and they own all these assets, and you're with them, then that sort of becomes considered part of your fortune.
Of course.
Not unless you've got some amazing prenup. But ultimately, well, she probably has. But because it's her money, and I would if I were her. But that's not the point. I mean, he's pretty considerably wealthy himself as well.
Yes, of course.
So I think, you know, the problem I feel for him is that he is disconnected with reality. If he had looked at that again, why have they not the windfall tax, which I don't generally agree in, but I think at this point it could have been a one-off, because they benefited heavily in some aspects after the pandemic, and also a lot of those fuel companies were talking about £20 billion profit. $20 billion.
I'm actually quite pleased he didn't go for a windfall tax, because we might have been sitting here saying, well, here's somebody who's prepared to sort of bend with the economic wind, and that's a rather big sort of political ask at the moment. You know, it's something that a lot of MPs have easily fallen into. But I mean, you do have to look at the long-term requirements of energy companies and how they have to buck the trends in energy pricing and all the rest of it. So I think it might have been quite a sort of politically easy thing for him to do, but not necessarily the right thing to do.
I think the problem is electricity, gas and fuel prices, particularly solid fuels and the fuels that you put, you know, oil in your central heating, it's going to come and bite him him really hard, because I mean, mine's gone up by about £100 a month, and you just can't afford it.
Well, they just literally send you a thing saying, oh, by the way, although you're paying this much for exactly the same thing, next month you'll pay £100
and then they say, and don't worry about it, we'll sort it all out with your bank, because you've already signed up, haven't you?
We will give you a different instalment plan that will work out nicely for us.
Yes.
Right, well, what's your view on that, though? Do you think Rishi's the right... Did he strike a chord with you? Do you feel he's detached, and perhaps the fact that he's a billionaire and nothing to take away from being a billionaire?
No.
But do you think that might have be one of the reasons why his statement was so, well, discombobulated? I was looking forward to using that word at some point. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, could we be seeing the beginning of the end of the monarchy? Prince William and Kate haven't had the easiest of visits to Jamaica as they attempted to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The royals were met with protests over slavery and tensions over the relationship between the monarchy and Britain's former colonies. So is this the beginning of the end for them? Send me your thoughts, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at gbnews, and there is a poll up right now asking, are tensions between the royals and the Commonwealth the beginning of the end for the monarchy? Cast your vote now, but first, let's get some weather.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather, and if you like dry, warm and sunny weather, we've got plenty more of that to come as we go through this weekend. Now, the reason for that is high pressure, firmly in charge of our weather. It's sat across the map, and it's not going anywhere very quickly over the next few days. Certainly through the rest of Friday and into the weekend, this high pressure will be holding on. bringing with it very light winds as well. So through the rest of this evening, plenty of sunshine to enjoy to end the day, and then clear skies for most of us overnight will mean it will turn quite chilly in places. We have got some mist and fog patches forming in some spots, and there will be some wet weather affecting Shetland, but away from that it's largely clear skies and temperatures plummeting down. So we will see a touch of frost as we start the day on Saturday, but that does mean we'll be compensated with plenty of blue skies. And it's a sunny start to the day and a sunny day throughout for most places. We will have a bit more of a breeze just across that southeast corner, making it feel just a little bit fresher than perhaps it has done through Friday. And we continue to see some cloud affecting the far north and northeast of Scotland, but by and large it's a fine day for most places. And look at these temperatures. We should be around 12 for this time of year, so to get 19 or 20 is pretty warm indeed. Now through Saturday evening, a few bits and pieces of cloud will float around at times, but for most places it stays dry and clear. Notice this mass of cloud though across the North Sea. That's low cloud and fog, and that'll start to drift its way in across eastern areas, turning things grey and misty as we start Sunday morning. So a bit of a different feel here, but still clear skies out to the west and still the risk of some frost first thing on Sunday. Through Sunday then, a bit of a different picture across eastern areas of England, eastern Scotland as well. Much more cloud, a greyer picture here, and a bit more of a breeze across the southeast, making it feel quite chilly. But elsewhere, plenty of sunshine. We keep the dry weather into the start of next week, but it will begin to turn a bit colder by the middle of the week. Bye-bye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua and I'm still with my panel, broadcaster and writer John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Now, before the break, we were discussing the Chancellor Rishi Sunak as he's facing increasing pressure over the cost of living, with prices continuing to soar. His spring statement has come under fire for not doing enough to support families, in fact, for not doing enough. We'll be discussing that in more detail after 5 o'clock today. And I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? We'll be talking about that after 5. But first, let's just take a quick look at what you've been saying about his performance this week. Clive says, I wouldn't be surprised if this Chancellor gets rid of the minimum wage. He doesn't seem to know the struggles of most people. Stephen says, if you do your research, you'll know that Rishi Sunak comes from a pretty normal background. His dad was a GP and his mum ran a local chemist and got to be where he is by working hard. Normal? What, so his dad's a GP? Listen, that's quite privileged already. And they've got their own shop. Like that, I'm not being funny, but GPs do earn good money. They're very, very prominent, respected. And if you do your background, he did go to Oxford, and I did do my research. And he also worked in a hedge fund as well, and they earn an absolute fortune. So he wasn't poor himself. So I don't know how much experience he would have had actually being a normal taxpayer like all of us, actually living in the normal world. You know, Wanda says, I'm not keen on Sunak or Boris. I wish we could bring back Maggie. Oh, God, wouldn't that be great? You know what? She was good, wasn't she? Right, so now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, could we be seeing the beginning of the end for the monarchy as we know it? A royal tour of Jamaica intended to boost relationships with Commonwealth countries and celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee turned into somewhat of a PR nightmare as Prince William and Kate, their first engagement in Belize, were hurriedly cancelled following a protest by some residents. You can see it now. It's not looking great. There were also protests in the capital, Kingston, calling on the UK to apologise now for its slave trading past. The Jamaican Prime Minister also hinted, as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge stood next to him, that he would rather not have the Queen as head of state anymore. Less than 6 months since Barbados implemented that exact step. So have times changed, and can the royals change with it? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is this the beginning of the end for the monarchy as we know it? So I'm joined now by Sarah Robertson, the royal and entertainment reporter at the Sunday Mirror. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. So talk to me about this tour. Is it perceived as a disaster now for the royals?
It's not been the best in terms of public relations that a royal tour has seen. I mean, that we cannot argue with. But there's obviously been a lot of controversy around it. We saw the pictures of William and Kate shaking hands with children who'd come to meet them. Some in the media tried to twist that to say, you know, look, they're speaking to children from behind a wire fence, when actually Raheem Sterling, the footballer, had done exactly the same thing just a few days previously to it. So I think what we've seen here is Republicans are trying to twist images that we're getting through from this royal tour to try and garner sympathy for a royal revolt. You know, we know that Republicans want to see the monarchy end with the death of Queen Elizabeth, and they're sort of using this royal tour to try and create dissent and say, look, you know, what's the point of having this? It's not going well. They look out of touch. And I just feel, you know, there's a bit of an agenda here coming from Republicans who are trying to monetize this for their own movement and use it for their own movement. Do I think the monarchy can remain? Yes, I do. I mean, yes, as I said before, there are calls, you know, for it to be abolished when Queen Elizabeth dies. But when they did the latest poll that they did back in February, only a fifth of people felt that, you know, we shouldn't have a monarchy once the Queen goes. So that's not an overwhelming majority, is it? You know, it's still in the minority. And I think, you know, the royal family can recover from this. They will recover from this, and they will go on.
Do you think that some of the things that have happened with Meghan and Harry have kind of been the sort of the ignition for this feeling? Because a lot of people talking about removing links to slavery and people wanting repatriations and apologies for the slave trade, and Harry and Meghan, and how, you know, there was this hint of racism within the royal family, but no one was named. Do you think that these things have fueled this whole sort of environment, this whole climate for the royal family?
Actually, no, I don't. It would be very easy to level that at Meghan and Harry, and I'm not a Meghan Markle or Prince Harry fan by any means. I think actually, if anything, they've done more to bolster support for the Queen and the monarchy, because, you know, people here in this country and around the world saw how they turned their backs and gallivanted off to America, where really, what have they done out there? Nothing. So actually, I think a lot of people felt more sympathy for the Queen and the monarchy and saw them as being dissenters, really, who had turned their backs and weren't very loyal. No, I don't think it's a case of that at all. But I do think there has been a growing movement, shall we say, among politicians around the world who have their own agendas, such as what we've seen in the likes of Jamaica and other islands. You know, this movement, Barbados, for example, they didn't put out, there wasn't a referendum to no longer have the Queen representing them as their head of state. That was something their own politicians moved to do themselves. I think if, you know, these islands of Jamaica or Belize or the Bahamas, for example, if they decide to do that, it'd be very interesting if they do give a referendum to the people, if the actual people themselves want to see the Queen, or will it be Prince Charles when he comes on, abolished as the head of state? And for that, I mean, I can't answer what that would be at the moment, but I think it would be nice for them to put it to the people. And I feel these politicians are using what we've seen with a revision of, obviously, racism history, or historical racism, should I say. They're trying to use that with which to leverage their own gains, what they're trying to do themselves. They're monopolizing this historical racism to try and gain Republican favor. And I think that's what's been going on here since we've obviously seen the BLM movement rise up. But
I suppose, Sarah, although you could argue that perhaps people are deeply embittered by the whole thing and may see the monarchy as the reason, as a symbol of it. Sarah, thank you so much for your view. That's Sarah Robertson. She's the Royal and Entertainment reporter at the Sunday Mirror. Really good to talk to you. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, could we be seeing the beginning of the end for the monarchy as we know it? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Nigel says, maybe the beginning of the end of the Commonwealth, but the choice to end the monarchy is the choice of the UK population only. Now, that's kind of what Sarah was alluding to, that perhaps in Jamaica they should have a referendum on that question. Lee says it ought to be the end of the UK providing funding to Jamaica. Jeff says, the Queen is such a strong leader and she holds it together, in my opinion. When she dies, I'm not sure it can go on. It'll be like Manchester United when Sir Alex Ferguson left. I love that. Thank you so much. Keep your views coming. We'll be discussing that with my panel. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, could we be seeing the beginning of the end of the monarchy? You will hear the thoughts of my panel, writer and broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. But first, let's pick up the latest news headlines.
Hello, it's 4:33. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. President Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan between the US and the EU that will reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. As part of the plan, the US will provide the EU with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. Coronavirus infections have risen sharply across most of the UK, with over 4.2 million people likely to have had the infection last week. The steep rise is being driven by the BA2 variant, a more transmissible form of Omicron. Northern Ireland is the only nation where infections are believed to be falling. Meanwhile, in Wales, the legal requirement to wear a face covering in shops and on public transport will end on Monday, as well as self-isolation after a positive COVID test. All legal restrictions were set to be removed, but First Minister Mark Drakeford says rising transmission and hospitalisations means some have to stay. And the boss of dairy giant Arla says the price of a pint of milk is likely to go up as farmers struggle with rising costs of feed, fertiliser and fuel. In the last 10 years, consumer prices have gone up 26%, whereas the cost of milk has dropped by 7%. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Stay with us. Nana Akua will be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. This is GB News. Just gone 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're online on digital radio as well. So back to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is this the beginning of the end of our monarchy? Prince William and Kate have just left Jamaica after the tour was overshadowed by protests and tensions between the royals and the Commonwealth. The Jamaican Prime Minister even declared that he would rather not have the Queen as head of state anymore, a move Barbados took back in November. And it brings into question the future of the royals and the Commonwealth. So I'm asking, is this the beginning of the end for the monarchy? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler and writer and broadcaster John Gaunt. So this show is obviously nothing without you guys. So talk to me about what your view is on the royals. I mean, William and Kate, I quite like them, but...
Yes, I do like them, and I very much hope that this isn't the beginning of the end for the monarchy. And I would just say that we should try and put this in context, because every now and again there is some kind of sort of drama around something in the royal family, and people ask this question. And I think largely because the Queen herself, partly because of her longevity in the role, but also because she has been so adept on the whole and barely put a foot wrong, she, in a sense, exemplifies the very best of the institution. But I mean, I really do think it's important we do try and hold on to it, because we're in an era that's increasingly diverse, but kind of controversial in its politics. You know, we've got this kind of move towards identity politics, which is very divisive. And to have symbols of our culture and our nation around which we can all coalesce, I think is a really increasingly necessary thing.
I think you need to separate things as well. What's happening in the Caribbean, and I've been there many, many times to all of those islands, what's actually happening there is there's a small vocal minority on most of the islands, including in Barbados, where they didn't even put it to a referendum. It was just the Labour Party. They decided it was going to be their policy to basically leave the Commonwealth, and that's their choice, and they can do what they want. In Jamaica, it's an even smaller amount of people. Kate and William went to Trenchtown, and they were actually welcomed, right? There was no real demos there. Kate is a superstar, without a shadow of a doubt.
She's amazing, yeah.
She's the new Diana in a way, although I wouldn't wish that title on another level. And then you've got to separate that with slavery. And William tried to do that in his speech. There is a problem with slavery. And him and his dad, Prince Charles, haven't quite gone far enough, in my opinion. When you go to the Caribbean and you actually begin to understand what it was the industrial transportation of millions of people, and they didn't care if people died on the way. They just saw it as collateral damage and they threw them off. It was disgusting. I think a full apology is right. How you pay reparations, I don't know, but that's what should happen. But that's separate to the royal family. And just because there's been these protests, and overall the tour has been a massive success, that is not a reason to start questioning, do we want to keep the monarchy?
Do you not think that...
Especially
do you not think... I mean, look, I love the royal family. I think they're fabulous, and I don't want them to go. I don't know how I feel about Charles and Camilla. I'm still, you know, the whole Diana thing. I loved Princess Diana, so there's still a little bit of a uncomfortableness about those two. William and Kate, I think, are fabulous and absolute, you know, they represent everything that I want to see our royal family representing. But I think that just like we have our own right to self-determination, so we didn't want to be in the European Union.
Yes.
If the people choose that, or they feel as strongly that the connection with the United Kingdom is no longer something they want to treasure in that manner, then I think good luck to them. They should get on with it.
Yeah, you can't object to it, for God's sake.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly right. I mean, I wouldn't suggest otherwise, although I do think that the way that William handled the more political side of the tour this week, I thought seemed on the whole to be pretty positive and pretty confident, although in a way he did only kind of cede to one side of the argument about the British imperial past and slavery, and perhaps he could have also stressed the extent to which Britain was at the forefront of moving away from slavery. And I think that, it's sometimes very difficult to make that case when you're in the eye of the kind of political controversy.
Well, his father couldn't do it either, could he? But between them now, they need to come up with a form of words that makes that happen. Because I do think we should apologise for the horror of... Yes, I do.
Well, look,
I do. I knew you'd shoot me down in flames.
Well, I'm not shooting you down in flames. I just sort of... With this whole narrative of people trying to attempt to remove all links to slavery, it ends up that you end up with nothing left. They should apologise if you but should I apologise for my grandfather or my great-great-grandfather? I mean, I think, I'm just asking, it's not them who've done it. So I'm just wondering why...
I thought he got that tone right, because he said it was a stain, which undoubtedly it was, and that's the word that was even used, I think, during the Victorian period as well, looking back over there, 100-year since we'd started to end what was a horrendous thing. But just going to, for a moment to the relationship that, Barbados obviously decided that it wanted independence, and yet at the same time it's heavily, there's been heavy investment in Barbados from China. And you could argue that that's almost a sort of modern empire.
They're swapping, and you know what, it's interesting, because I spoke to David Starkey, and we had him in the studio, and he was saying that the end of the British Empire is over, but the empire will continue, and now it's the turn of the Russian Empire potentially, and the Chinese Empire. So they're literally probably moving from one to another.
And in Belize, of course, there's a hell of a lot of Russian money, and also an awful lot of dodgy money, shall we say. So, you've got to be careful about it. I agree. I'm just saying that can't we come up with a form of words that would give some succour to those people who want us to recognise our role in slavery? But that isn't Corsair shirts. That's not pulling down statues.
Yeah, but I do believe in recognising your role in slavery or something bad, that maybe it was a historical thing. Yeah. But I feel slightly uncomfortable that you're going to say, oh, well, your great-great-grandfather did this, that and the other, so you're the one that's... but it was wrong, we've accepted it. But you know what? Slavery's still going on now in parts of Europe. So I think we need to...
Slavery is building the World Cup.
And so I think, if we really... People need to really look at the story of slavery and see what's happening. But as ever, the show's nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome one of our great British voices, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about what we're discussing. John Reid is in Kidderminster. John, thank you for joining us. Now, so the question, could we be seeing the beginning of the end of the monarchy as we know it? What's your view?
I don't think so. I think that the monarchy will survive. I hope it will survive. I'm in my 70s now, and I've had the monarchy and this Queen all my life. So, I don't know anything different. I can see that it's not without its mistakes in the past, and I can see that it's trying to modernise. But I honestly think that without the monarchy, we would be a much poorer country. Clearly, the Queen is going to move on. She won't live forever, but I think it's in safe hands with Charles and safe hands following him with William. I would raise a bit of a question mark. Sometimes they get bad publicity when Harry took his actions, for example, but generally speaking, I think the monarchy is in very safe hands.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah. Well, see, I'm a royalist. I think the royal family are fabulous. Listen, John, thank you so much for joining us and being a voice for us today. That is John Reid. He's there in Kidderminster. He's our great British voice. That's what John's saying. What about the impact of Meghan Markle and Harry on this whole picture?
Well, it's interesting what Sarah said, wasn't it? Which was a kind of inverse comment in a sense, because she was saying that as a result of their behaviour, people are more sympathetic towards the monarchy, towards the royal family. I mean, I am concerned that the royal families had a tendency sort of to dabble in politics, and if it goes down that route, then we really would be seeing the end of it. One of the best arguments for having a monarchy is that we don't have to go through the palaver of having another set of political institutions at the top of our constitution and an elected head of state. And I think, people who perhaps don't have a natural affinity with the royal family or even with monarchy often look at other countries where they have elected heads of state and say that is the reason why actually we should hang on to the monarchy.
Imagine having to elect a president. It's bad enough electing a politician. But and who would stand for it? Look, the Queen's done a fantastic job.
Amazing.
I don't share all the concerns I used to, that you have, about Charles and Camilla. I actually think Charles is doing a hell of a lot of good work, much of it under the radar. William has proved this week that he's ready for it. Kate's a superstar. Let's stop beating up on them and let's start completely ignoring the ginger whinger and his wife, right?
Yes.
Because we know what their agenda is. We know what the game is with them. We should just ignore them.
Well, he's obviously not here to defend himself. So if you call him names, not that I wouldn't agree with you, but that's not the point. He's not. So I can't.
They can go off and not do their podcast for $18 million.
They've only done one episode of that. One of them. They've got another one.
They can do what they want to do, but they shouldn't trade on the royal name. They can't have it both ways. They made a decision that they didn't want to be part of the royal family, and yet at the same time, when it suits them, they want to dip back into the privilege that name associates
Well, exactly.
them with.
There's the whole issue with security as well, isn't it? He wants to pay for his own security. They're refusing to allow him. He's taken them to court. I think that's what his action is this time.
There's been a whole thing about that this week. I mean, the bottom line is he went from a hero to a zero. Everybody loved him. He was the most popular royal. Then he got involved with... what's her name? I've forgotten. He got involved with her anyway, and I'm not going to blame her in a misogynist way and say, like, she's a Lady Macbeth or whatever. But the simple facts are, he has gone off the rails. We all liked him a lot more when he was playing strip pool with party girls in Las Vegas.
Well, I wasn't so impressed when he thought he'd dress up as a Nazi, but I mean,
Well, that was before then. That was a long time before then.
It doesn't make any difference.
No, I'm not.
It still sticks in my craw, and adding to the rest of it now, I can see really what that one was about. Well, anyway, I mean, who does that? Who does that and think that's good? I mean, he has apologised, but anyway, today I'm asking, could we be seeing the beginning of the end for the monarchy as we know it? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. John says, I don't support the end of the monarchy, but the end of the Commonwealth wouldn't be an entirely bad thing. It's simply a slightly pointless reminder of the UK's colonial past. Let's get away from it. Bob says, I think the vast majority of people love the monarchy, and even if we lose the Commonwealth, we'll still have the monarchy in the UK. Stephen says, I think it could be the beginning of the end. The new generation coming through aren't as big royalists as the baby boomers, and all the woke nonsense in their heads is turning them against the monarchy. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show, and I'm asking, is this the beginning of the end of the monarchy? And currently, guess what the figure is? 19% of you say yes. 81% of you say no, it won't be the end. Well, look, keep your thoughts and votes coming. We'd like to see how that shapes up towards the end of the programme. But if you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, a new birth control pill for men has been found to be 99% effective preventing pregnancy in tests on mice. I wonder if it'll work on men. Well, no, it's tests on... They're not... Oh, I see. Very good, John. Did you hear that? Did you miss it? He said... Listen, I'll be joined in the studio by intimate health specialist Dr. Shirin Lakhani. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather. And if you like dry, warm and sunny weather, we've got plenty more of that to come as we go through this weekend. Now, the reason for that is high pressure, firmly in charge of our weather. It's sat across the map and it's not going anywhere very quickly over the next few days. Certainly through the rest of Friday and into the weekend, this high pressure will be holding on, bringing with it very light winds as well. So through the rest of this evening, plenty of sunshine to enjoy to end the day, and then clear skies for most of us overnight will mean it will turn quite chilly in places. We have got some mist and fog patches forming in some spots, and there will be some wet weather affecting Shetland, but away from that, it's largely clear skies and temperatures plummeting down. So we will see a touch of frost as we start the day on Saturday, but That does mean we'll be compensated with plenty of blue skies. And it's a sunny start to the day and a sunny day throughout for most places. We will have a bit more of a breeze just across that southeast corner, making it feel just a little bit fresher than perhaps it has done through Friday. And we continue to see some cloud affecting the far north and northeast of Scotland, but by and large it's a fine day for most places. And look at these temperatures. We should be around 12 for this time of year, so to get 19 or 20 is pretty warm indeed. Now through Saturday evening, a few bits and pieces of cloud will float around at times, but for most places it stays dry and clear. Notice this mass of cloud though across the North Sea. That's low cloud and fog, and that'll start to drift its way in across eastern areas, turning things grey and misty as we start Sunday morning. So a bit of a different feel here, but still clear skies out to the west and still the risk of some frost first thing on Sunday. Through Sunday then, a bit of a different picture across eastern areas of England, eastern Scotland as well. Much more cloud, a greyer picture here, and a bit more of a breeze across the southeast, making it feel quite chilly. But elsewhere, plenty of sunshine. We keep the dry weather into the start of next week, but it will begin to turn a bit colder by the middle of the week. Bye-bye.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 5 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Now, a birth control pill for men has been found to be 99% effective in preventing pregnancy in mice. It's a development which could transform contraception methods, most of which put the burden on women to stop the pregnancy. So I'm joined now by someone who was involved in the creation of this treatment. Dr. Gunda Georg is the department head of medicinal chemistry at the University of Minnesota. So, Dr. Georg, tell us a little bit about this. What's the latest and how does this treatment work?
Yeah, so we are really excited about having these results. I've worked for 20 years to try to develop a male contraceptive agent. It's non-hormonal, which has some advantages over hormonal birth control pills. And so we finally have arrived at a compound that, when given to mice, as you said, is 99% effective. And not only is it effective, but it is also reversible in our mouse studies. And this is very important because you don't want to sterilize a man. You want to enable them to take control of their fertility, or of couples to do birth control, prevent pregnancies. So this is very exciting news. And then, of course, if you have a drug, it has to be exceedingly safe, because we're not treating a disease here, but healthy people are going to be taking this particular contraceptive pill, and so we have to assure that it's completely safe. And so the next step is really to provide information about the safety of the drug to the Food and Drug Administration to hopefully get a clinical trial to start very soon.
Right, so they're going to do clinical trials in men. You said that it's reversible, so is it as soon as they stop that they can then, they're then able to sort of get the woman pregnant? And is it like the female pill where you take it, you might take it, how do you take the treatment?
Yeah, so that's, of course, another advantage of the compound that we developed. It is orally bioavailable, so we anticipate that it would be a once-a-day pill. And fertility, of course, it would take a while for the fertility to go down. And then when you stop the drug, of course, it takes a while also to get fertility back, because you have a spermatogenic cycle, meaning the sperm is developing in mice over 36 days. In humans, it's about 74 days. And so you have to probably go through one spermatogenic cycle to induce the fertility. And then, of course, when you discontinue the drug treatment, it takes the sperm a while, to develop and be fully functional again.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, it'd be interesting to see how the actual trials, the full trials on men gets on, and whether that works. Dr. Gunda Georg, thank you so much for joining us. That's Dr. Gunda Georg, Department Head of Medicinal Chemistry at the University of Minnesota. I'm also joined now in the studio by Dr. Shirin Lakhani, who's the intimate health specialist. Now, Shirin, how much would this sort of successful thing be? I mean, what kind of a change do you think this would be if this actually is successful in men?
I mean, it'd be great to take some of the contraceptive burden away from women, wouldn't it, Nana? At the moment, women are ultimately almost entirely responsible for ensuring they don't fall pregnant. There hasn't been anything available to men besides condoms and vasectomies. So the onus generally has been on the female. So something like this that's safe, effective and reversible would be a great thing. But then the other side of it is, how much would you trust a man?
I was about to ask, that's the next question. Would you trust them?
I think there are pros and cons for it. So on the one hand, it'd be great for a man to be able to take control of whether or not he wants to become a father. So from that point of view, it's great. He can take the tablet and ensure that he's not going to father any unwanted children. But as a woman and as a mother, I don't know how much trust I'd actually put on the man to be responsible for that side of it.
I suppose if you're a single man and you are, obviously I would suggest that you do use other forms of contraception, but you may have a few lovers and they may not mind. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that at all. But in that respect, you're not likely to get people pregnant. Or even if you do use a barrier method of protection, then you still won't get someone pregnant if that sort of fails.
But I think the issue is, if we're looking at the population in general, as a woman, would you actually trust a man to take the pill? Because the consequences for a man forgetting to take a pill aren't as great as they are for a woman.
That's true, isn't it? So it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
And it'd be interesting to see how it develops as well, because we have very limited information at the moment. But the fact that it doesn't have side effects in mice is great, and I wish female contraception was researched and developed in the same way.
It's funny that when it comes to the men, they always sort of slightly get it right, don't they? When it's the women, I mean, I'm not saying there's any, but it just seems to be that they could probably work that out, and yet they're still huge.
Absolutely. I mean, they said 20 years development for a safe male pill. I wish they put the same sort of research into women's health.
Well, I don't know how long it took them to develop it, but Shirin, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to talk to you. That's Dr. Shirin Lakhani, an intimate health specialist for women and men. Right, if you've just joined me, where have you been? I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online. More to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock now. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's keep you up to date with the latest news. Right, so this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. So for the next hour, we will try and get back some news for you. We do apologise about that. Now, this show is nothing without your views, so keep them coming. And as ever, it's all about opinion, mine, theirs and yours. We'll be debating, discussing at times, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is writer and broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Now, still to come in a few moments' time, we'll put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in my feature Friday Focus. And this week I'll be talking about the Chancellor's plans. He plans to cut VAT on household energy efficiency measures, things like insulation, solar panels and heat pumps. The measures were announced as part of the spring statement, but there's been criticism from some who say that they're unaffordable anyway. We'll continue to discuss some of that and the other measures that Rishi Sunak has implemented this week. And for our Great British Debate, I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? There's been widespread concern that the policies he's put forward just don't go far enough to tackle the cost of living crisis. So should the Chancellor pull up his handbrake and do a U-turn on his spring statement? What is your view? And of course, the government's chief medical officer, Sir Chris Whitty, has warned that the lives of children could be cut short because of a significant increase in obesity rates. So are parents to blame for children being overweight? Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But first, let's get back and get you your latest news.
Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan with the EU to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. The US will provide the European Union with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. Speaking at a briefing in Poland, President Biden said democratic countries needed to show their commitment to freedom.
The single most important thing that we can do from the outset is keep the democracies united in our opposition and our effort to curtail the devastation that is occurring at the hands of a man who, I quite frankly, think is a war criminal.
Well, Russia has announced the first phase of its military operation in Ukraine has mostly been completed. The Defence Ministry says it's now focusing on the eastern Donbass region, which comprises Luhansk and Donetsk. It claims Russian-backed separatists now control 93% of the Luhansk region and 54% of the Donetsk area. The US says the move is a negotiating tactic. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says a humanitarian corridor will be opened out of the besieged city of Mariupol today for those with access to a vehicle. Tens of thousands of civilians are believed to be trapped with little food, water, medicine, power or heat. 300 people were reportedly killed when Russia bombed a theatre sheltering women and children in Mariupol last week. The UN Refugee Agency says around 3.7 million people have now fled Ukraine since the conflict began. The British Ministry of Defence says Ukraine has reoccupied towns and defensive positions up to 21 miles east of the capital, Kiev. It also says in the south, Russian forces heading to Odessa are being slowed by logistical problems and Ukrainian resistance. Alexander Nosachenko is a Ukrainian businessman turned soldier. He told us why he's fighting on the front line.
What happens to those who cannot escape, who have no means to travel or to immigrate to Europe? Those will be ultimately killed by Russians. That's crystal clear. And then the big question mark was, why was I doing this, training for all these 6 years? Probably for the moment like this.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the Taliban's decision to close schools to girls in Afghanistan is unjustifiable. The UK, US and Canada, along with representatives of the European Union, have condemned the decision in a joint statement. They say denying their right to an education contradicts the Taliban's previous assurances. Nargis Nehan is a former Afghan politician in Kabul. She told GB News there are millions of girls living as prisoners in the country.
Living, you don't know what you're living for. You're not treated as a human being anymore. You don't have access to the very, very basic rights. Even for small decisions such as going to the doctor, you have to have a mail company. So as a human being, you don't have any independency. You don't have any freedom. You cannot earn for yourself. You cannot decide for yourself. And the future seems very dark and bleak, and you don't see anybody around trying to help you out.
The Transport Secretary has called for the resignation of the P&O Ferries chief executive. That's after Peter Hebblethwaite admitted he should have consulted unions before sacking 800 workers without notice. They're being replaced with cheaper agency staff. Coronavirus infections have risen sharply across most of the UK, with over 4.2 million people likely to have had the infection last week. The steep rise is being driven by the Omicron BA2 variant, a more transmissible form of Omicron. The number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has set a record high for the 5th day in a row. Northern Ireland is the only nation where infections are believed to be falling. Meanwhile, in Wales, more than 1,400 people have been admitted to hospital with COVID, the highest number of admissions in over a year. First Minister Mark Drakeford has announced that the legal requirement to wear a face covering in shops and on public transport will end on Monday, as well as self-isolation after a positive COVID test.
The rapid spread of infections caused by BA2 means that we need to retain some of these protections in law for a little while longer. And at the same time, we will continue to issue authoritative advice to help people take those steps which protect us all.
Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua. Good afternoon. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. So let's start this hour with our Friday focus for this week. Earlier this week, in his spring statement, Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced that he'd be scrapping VAT on solar panels, heat pumps and insulation from April. That was as part of his plan to support families through the cost of living crisis. Here's the moment he announced these measures in Parliament.
As energy costs rise, we know that energy efficiency will make a big difference to bills. But if homeowners want to install energy-saving materials, at the moment, only some items qualify for a 5% VAT relief. So I can announce for the next 5 years, homeowners having materials like solar panels, heat pumps or insulation installed will no longer pay 5% VAT, they will pay 0. Yes!
The government says it could save households around about £1,000 per year in tax relief.
But the move has been criticised by some campaigners who say the measures still don't make energy-efficient measures affordable. So joining me now is someone from a group that supports the Chancellor's announcement. Sam Hall is the director of the Conservative Environment Network. It's a forum for Conservatives who support conservation and decarbonisation and has 131 Tory MPs in its ranks. Sam, thank you for joining me. What makes your reaction? What was your reaction when you heard what the Chancellor announced with regard to the VAT cut to solar panels, insulation and heat pumps?
Well, we warmly welcomed it, and actually a number of the MPs in our group had written to the Chancellor in advance of the spring statement calling for this exact measure. It will help with the upfront cost of installing insulation, solar panels and other materials that can help people reduce their energy bills permanently and also reduce our reliance on imports of gas as well from overseas. Obviously, it's not a complete solution in terms of retrofitting the UK's housing stock or building stock, and I think campaigners are right to highlight the need for additional support for vulnerable households, for people in social housing as well, to install some of this insulation. But I think it's a very important step, and combined with the fact that gas prices are so high at the moment, it will mean that these measures will pay back very quickly and will ease the pressure of rising cost of living for some households.
It's interesting that you said that combined with the cost of obviously gas, electricity, etc., going up, that this will help. But it does take many, 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 many years to recoup the money that you've invested in something like solar panels. So I doubt that people will feel that. The other question is, have you considered the price of heat pumps and the price of solar panels and the price of insulation, and who can actually afford that? So therefore, who is actually getting that saving? And if you do consider those, doesn't it turn out that it's the more wealthy of society and not those that the Chancellor is supposed to be helping?
Well, just to pick up on that point about the payback period, so we've done a bit of research looking into this and take a measure, for example, like cavity wall insulation or indeed loft insulation. And we think that given how high gas prices are now, you'd look to recoup the total the upfront investment within a couple of years maximum. That is how high gas prices are at the moment, that these measures now make economic sense for lots of households to look at. You're right that some of the measures have an even higher upfront cost, like heat pumps. The government has got a grant scheme for heat pumps, so this offers you £5,000 discount on a heat pump. Some energy companies are coming forward in the next year or so with an offer on heat pumps. They expect to be able to reduce the cost of installing them. Octopus think that combined with that government grant, they can install a heat pump for the same price as you can have a gas boiler installed in your home. So I think the market is bringing forward products into this space, which should hopefully would be lower in cost than some of these products have been in the past.
I think I might invest in a company that makes solar panels, heat pumps and also insulation. I think that's where the money's going to be. But my concern, though, again, is that the people who will be benefiting from this, who benefit from the saving, once they've taken all that money out to spend for this and get this VAT, not have to pay this VAT, my concern is that this doesn't really help the normal person on the street. Look, I can't afford heat pumps or solar panels. So this wonderful removal of VAT has no effect on me whatsoever. You support, obviously, all of us supporting good, protecting the environment. But a lot of us are looking at this and thinking, why on earth did the Chancellor not look to do something that would perhaps tax the big oil companies, like a windfall tax or something like that? Why, I'm just listening and thinking, this doesn't really help anybody, really, that I know.
Well, as I say, I don't think it's a complete answer to the energy crisis. I think it will help a certain section of people, and I think it will make a difference for those people, and it will help them reduce their energy bills. I would like to see support for people in fuel poverty in terms of upfront government grants to help them install insulation and some of these measures. I think that could help people who are going to be really struggling over the summer and indeed next winter with rising energy prices. I think there's also things the government could do looking at energy bills and taking some of the legacy renewables costs off those bills and funding them out of general taxation. I think that would help people as well. In terms of the oil and gas windfall tax that you mentioned, I think personally I'm sceptical of that, because I think we do need to encourage more investment in new energy supply, and lots of the oil and gas companies are looking to transition to clean energies. The companies like BP and Shell have both got projects to develop offshore wind off the coast, and that will help us get off Russian gas and other imported fossil fuels. So at a time when we are facing this challenge around energy supply, I think it'd be wrong to disincentivize that investment and deplete the capital of oil and gas companies.
Do you think, all right, Sam, well, they're making billions. I hear you, but it just feels a little bit... All right, Sam, I appreciate all of that. That's interesting stuff. That's Sam Hall. He's the Director of Conservative Environment Network. I'm also joined now in the studio by Andy Mayer, who's the Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Andy, thank you so much for joining me. What do you make of this wonderful cut of VAT for people who can afford to buy solar panels and heat pumps and afford to insulate their homes?
Well, usually I'm going to agree with Sam more than I disagree with him on this topic. I mean, you're right to highlight the distributional impact of this VAT cut. It is principally going to benefit people on middle incomes, those who can afford large renovation projects, those who've got large houses, possibly houses in areas where it's much easier to get access. So it's not going to be a great result in terms of social justice or the red wall. But that isn't the point of it. This is a measure that already existed. There was a 5% rate of VAT on energy-saving measures. And what the government's really done here is a simplification. They've actually used the laws that they've been able to do by leaving the European Union to cut the rate down to 0 and slightly extend it to also include things like wind turbines. So if you want to build a wind turbine in your back garden, and you've got a back garden, then this is great news, and it's a little bit easier to do that now.
Well, if you own your own home, which a lot of people don't, and you're not renting, and there's too much sort of missing in this for me. So what do you think then? Did you, in your view, do you think this was the right way to go in terms of energy efficiency and in terms of what the... Because I mean, what I was saying to Sam was that actually, surely it would have been better to windfall tax these big companies.
Well, the windfall tax, I definitely agree more with Sam. And by way of example, the announcement from Shell yesterday was that they would be investing $25 billion in the United Kingdom. And that's on 75% low carbon measures and 25% new fields in the North Sea, we would assume. BP's announcement today is on building electrical charging infrastructure for electric cars. That's $1 billion. Now, what Labour said the windfall tax would raise, and it's not really a windfall tax, it's just a repeat of Gordon Brown's old supplementary charge on the North Sea, was only $1.2 billion. So on the one side of the ledger, $1.2 billion from tax, which would then be spent on whatever the government likes. And on the other side of the ledger, $26 billion from just 2 companies. So very clearly, had that windfall tax happened, that wouldn't have happened. It would have been a no-brainer that that's the wrong thing for the government.
Yeah, but I mean, look, all these electric charging points, which is a lovely idea, but once again, electric cars, what is it, £44,000 for an electric car? Can't afford one. Charging point, well, even although I live in a relatively nice house, there's nowhere that I could charge a car. It'd be on the street. Once again, that would be detached from my house. There'd probably be cruel people who'd find it amusing to unplug the charger. So I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, that's a great incentive, but most people haven't got an electric car either. And
I agree with you. The government themselves should not be the ones installing these chargers. It should be left to private enterprise like BP in what they've said they're going to do.
Yeah, but that's great. Even if BP do that, though, that doesn't really, so what? I'd rather see them pay a windfall tax to reduce what I'm paying in tax or to even give me some money back. Rather than them giving some money so that I can go out and buy a £44,000 electric car, and then eventually that's very kind of them to allow me to then charge that vehicle, and the electricity is probably made through maybe the fossil fuel that's provided from them.
Well, you get a sugar rush of short-term tax from that, but what you do is kill investment in the North Sea, and the consequence of that would be to keep petrol prices high, and the people who would most suffer from that are the working people who are driving vans,
but they're not going to bring the prices down anyway.
Taxi drivers.
They're not bringing the prices down anyway, and in fact, that 5p reduction in at the pumps for the general punter hasn't yet gone out in many petrol stations because they're saying that it will take time for that to filter through and that they don't have any control of the price and all this. So there seems to be a barrier for that as well.
I mean, to be fair to them, that is actually true.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt it is, but what I'm saying is...
somewhere between 2 weeks to 4 weeks for things to filter through from the oil price and tax changes. Now, good PR for them would have been to have done it faster, but it is a competitive market. This has been investigated quite a lot, and when people say that these companies are collaborating to try and keep prices high, there's never been any evidence that's true.
So there's no cartel?
There's no cartel, no.
Interesting, because you never get one where the prices... So they've obviously got very little control of it. So it seems quite odd that Rishi Sunak thought that he would say, well, that's going to start from 6 o'clock today, which obviously on the day he announced it. Surely he would know that.
He could have handled it a bit better and set expectations a little bit lighter on when the change would happen. But at the moment, we're still seeing the impact of the high oil prices that were about 2 weeks ago, which happily are coming down a bit and bumping around. But we should expect oil prices and gas prices to be lower in the medium term because that's what the future markets are saying.
So in terms of saving on people's energy bills, then, how in your view, how much money do you think people could start to try and save on the bills? I mean, they're going up exponentially, so it's almost impossible, isn't it?
This year, it's going to be really tough. And because we don't have a real market for the price of energy at the moment, we've got the energy price cap. Nothing is going to change until October. And when October comes, we're expecting things to go up even further, but we don't yet know by how much because of the way things are volatile at the moment. Now, the first thing the government should be doing in order to try and get those prices down is increasing supply. The only way it can do that this year is by changing sources of imports. So Europe is overly reliant on Russian gas, a little bit less so on oil, and it's now doing deals with, for example, America today to get American shale gas into the EU system, from which we will benefit as well. So that's the first thing to do. The second is domestic supply. So they've really got to get a rocket underneath the North Sea and also with domestic fracking.
They need to get on with it, don't they, and sharpish. Listen, it's really good to talk to you, Andy. Thank you so much for joining me and talking me through that. That's much appreciated. That is Andy Mayer. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Right, coming up, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? With the UK facing the biggest cost of living crisis in generation, there's been widespread criticism of the Chancellor's spring statement by those who say it doesn't go far enough to support families. So I'm asking, should he U-turn on it? First, let's get some weather.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather, and if you like dry, warm and sunny weather, we've got plenty more of that to come as we go through this weekend. Now, the reason for that is high pressure, firmly in charge of our weather. It's sat across the map and it's not going anywhere very quickly over the next few days. Certainly through the rest of Friday and into the weekend, this high pressure will be holding on, bringing with it very light winds as well. So through the rest of this evening, plenty of sunshine to enjoy to end the day, and then clear skies for most of us overnight will mean it will turn quite chilly in places. We have got some mist and fog patches forming in some spots, and there will be some wet weather affecting Shetland, but away from that, it's largely clear skies and temperatures plummeting down. So we will see a touch of frost as we start the day on Saturday, but that does mean we'll be compensated with plenty of blue skies. And it's a sunny start to the day and a sunny day throughout for most places. We will have a bit more of a breeze just across that southeast corner, making it feel just a little bit fresher than perhaps it has done through Friday. And we continue to see some cloud affecting the far north and northeast of Scotland, but by and large it's a fine day for most places. And look at these temperatures. We should be around 12 for this time of year, so to get 19 or 20 is pretty warm indeed. Now, through Saturday evening, a few bits and pieces of cloud will float around at times, but for most places it stays dry and clear. Notice this mass of cloud, though, across the North Sea. That's low cloud and fog, and that'll start to drift its way in across eastern areas, turning things grey and misty as we start Sunday morning. So a bit of a different feel here, but still clear skies out to the west and still the risk of some frost first thing on Sunday. Through Sunday then, a bit of a different picture across eastern areas of England, eastern Scotland as well. Much more cloud, a greyer picture here, and a bit more of a breeze across the southeast, making it feel quite chilly. But elsewhere, plenty of sunshine. We keep the dry weather into the start of next week, but it will begin to turn a bit colder by the middle of the week. Bye-bye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
26 minutes after 5. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm joined by my panel, broadcaster and writer John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Now, before the break, we were discussing whether the Chancellor's decision to cut panels, heat pumps and insulation will actually make people install them in their homes. So let's have a look at saying. Ian says homeowners cannot afford to heat their homes as it is. Where do people think we'll find thousands of pounds for solar panels, heat pumps and additional insulation? Malcolm says the Conservatives live in a bubble which excludes the reality that the majority of us live in. And Mo says no help at all to the millions of us who rent. Why would we spend that sort of money on homes that we don't even own? Well, good question, but I think Boris Johnson did something like that, didn't he? Well, listen, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? The Chancellor's been widely criticised for not going far enough to tackle the cost of living crisis in his so-called mini-budget, which was delivered on Wednesday. He did take 5 pence off the cost of fuel, scrap VAT on things like solar panels and heat pumps, and increase the amount of money that you can earn before paying national insurance. But as living standards look set to hit their lowest level since the Second World War, I want to ask if the Chancellor should U-turn and do more to tackle the crisis. I'm joined now by personal finance and business broadcaster Laurie Retty. So Laurie, lovely to talk to you. Who's going to be helping? So if we unpack what the Chancellor said, just start by telling us who, if anyone, actually benefits from his proposals.
Well, I would go so far as to say there are no winners in this specific statement. Obviously, the biggest benefit, I would say, is the cut on national insurance. So now you have to earn a little bit more in order to start paying it. So that is going to really help people on lower incomes. However, that doesn't help people on middle incomes who are still going to be paying more national insurance from next month. Couple that with rising inflation, interest rates that are going up, council tax is going up 3%. You're going to have to start paying for COVID tests soon. Fuel is going up. Food, clothes, everything is going up. So yes, all right, there was a couple of things in there that are going to be a little bit helpful, but it's just not going to touch the sides.
So let's go specifically then. So all those things rising, it doesn't seem like anyone benefits. Do you think that he chose the right things? And if he didn't, then what do you think he should have done? In particular, if we look at energy, the cost of energy.
So energy, there wasn't really anything mentioned about energy at all. Energy bills are going to be potentially going up to £3,000 a year per average household by the end of the year, other than obviously, which was previously mentioned, the £200 loan that we're going to be given. There is nothing to help struggling households. So that was a really shocking point, that just nothing came out of this spring statement, particularly on energy, other than you mentioned the scrap of VAT on things like solar panels, but the majority of people can't afford solar panels. So that was a really disappointing one. We thought that there was going to be more on that. And to be honest with you, I could have cried afterwards, and I thought there's no magic rabbit coming out of his hat at the end of this. There is no help.
Because it just seems a bit odd that you would create taxes that reduce people's capacity to spend in the economy and then try and stimulate it. I mean, as far as I studied in economics, that's always a good thing if you can get people to spend money. If you reduce their capacity to do so, then everything around it also then suffers. So how significant do you think is the 5p cut on fuel duty compared to the actions taken by other chancellors in the past?
It's just not enough, is it? I mean, in theory, yes, that's great, but the average car fuel for a family is about £100 every time they top it up. That is about £3 off. It's just not going to help, considering that bills have gone up. I think the average is about 30 pence since Christmas. So it doesn't go anywhere close enough. And again, that's something that I think he could have been stronger on.
What about pensioners then? What about the impact on pensioners? Because it turns out that 55% of any money that they then withdraw will be taxed. I mean, that seems unbelievable.
Sadly, pensioners have really lost out on this statement in particular. They are people who are definitely going to really, really struggle. Their rate's gone up by 3.5%, but that doesn't, again, anywhere touch the size on what inflation's doing. Inflation's double that. So they're going to, again, lose out, unfortunately. They're another group that are losing out on this statement, 100%.
Yeah. So how likely do you think it is that Rishi Sunak will do a U-turn on any of that?
Well, sadly, I don't see any reason why he would. He was being pressured to turn around his announcement on national insurance. And although he did something a little bit to make it sound like he was doing better, the reality is from next month, we're all going to be paying more for our national insurance if we earn over that threshold of £12,500. So I don't think he's going to make a U-turn. It's a really difficult one because I don't know where else that he could have made changes. And at least he did do something that was going to help the people struggling at the most. But then I would also argue, but what about pensioners at the other end? And also you've got struggling families at the bottom, but then what about the people who are just about managing in the middle? There is no help for them whatsoever. And yet, energy bills are astonishing. I mean, some families, I met a family last week whose energy bills are going to be more expensive from April than their rent. That's insane.
Wow.
Wow. Because they're on oil. And, the cost of oil is a lot of money.
Wow, wow. Well, listen, Laura, thank you so much for your thoughts. It's really good to hear your view. That's Laura Retty. She's a personal finance and business broadcaster. Right, so I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Adrian says, multi-millionaire MPs out of touch with the people. Something needs to be done to help everyone who is struggling in this country now. Woodsy says he will do it, but only if Marcus Rashford asks, I'm guessing. Very good, I love that. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our Great British Debate, and I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? You'll hear the thoughts from my panel, broadcaster and writer John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. And the government's chief medical officer, Sir Chris Whitty, has warned that the lives of children could be cut short because of the significant increase in obesity rates. We'll discuss that with chef and author Lyndon Wissart. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's 5:33. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. President Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan between the US and the EU that will reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. As part of the plan, the US will provide the EU with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. Meanwhile, Russia has announced the first phase of its military operation in Ukraine has been mostly completed. The Defence Ministry says it's now focusing on the country's breakaway Donbass region, which includes Luhansk and Donetsk. The US is describing it as a negotiating tactic and could be a prelude to a climb down by Moscow. 2 men and a teenage girl have been given life sentences for killing a father of 2 in Cardiff. Jason Edwards, Lee Strickland and Dion Timms Williams murdered Gary Jenkins in July 2021. The prosecution says the attack was motivated by greed, homophobia and violence. And the Irish Foreign Minister, Simon Coveney, is safe and has been taken to a secure location after a suspicious device was discovered outside a peace-building event in Belfast. Footage shows the moment Simon Coveney was abruptly ushered off a stage during a speech. Emergency services discovered the device in a hijacked van in the venue's car park. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Nana will be back in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's just coming up to 37 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So we return to our Great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? He's been criticised for not doing enough to tackle the cost of living crisis in his so-called mini-budget. He's defended his plans by saying that he can't solve every problem. Although I don't think he's solved any, has he? So I'm asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? Let's see what my panellists, writer and broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler make of that one. Right, so I'll start with you, John. Should he do a bit of a U-turn? There's quite a few things in there. And if so, which ones?
Yes, but he won't, I don't think. I think because it'll show weakness if he does. It should have been more thought out in the first place. You know, we have been through a bit. I do want to keep saying this. We have been through a terrible crisis. We've got now the war in Ukraine. However, he could have done more. And instead of battling and positioning himself against Liz Truss or Boris, can they put the country first? I think that's what needs to happen now. And I think the working class, to use a very old-fashioned term, are going to really suffer this year. And I think he has to be very careful about that, especially if we have a hot summer, because people are hurting already, Nana. You know, they can't afford their gas or electricity going up to $3,000 a year. They can't. I went to get some petrol in my wife's car, and it was 80 quid. It's only like a little old battered Volvo. Normally takes about 50 quid. And then if I bring it to London, I get charged 12 quid because it's diesel, which I was told to buy. So we bought a diesel as a second car. So I get charged there. Then I get the congestion charge. I'm sorry. You can only squeeze so much out of people, and they're squeezing now. The pips are coming out, and there's going to be trouble. I'm telling you, big trouble. The only thing they've got in their favour is that Labour are useless.
Well,
and
yes.
so, you know, Keir Starmer's got the charisma of this desk, so he's not going to be in opposition. It's frightening times. It's frightening times.
Very worrying for the Conservatives that recent polling has showed that people, they may not trust the Conservatives on the economy, but they seem to be trusting Labour to the same degree.
Yes.
So in other words, they're neutralising on the economy, which is a pretty bad place for the Conservative Party to be in.
Yeah.
I think your personal finance expert that we heard from before the break was very on the money, if I can make a say. In the sense that, you know, she sort of said, well, who are all these little incremental changes meant to satisfy? And potentially he's ended up really pleasing nobody with this statement. So I do disagree with you, actually. I think he may, if not U-turn, I think what he may do is come forward with some other measures.
Do you think perhaps he might suggest that this wonderful income tax reduction will be, instead of 2024, will be like next week? Or something.
Well, I mean, that I don't think he could fund that in that time. But I mean, that was a strange thing to do because it did smack of trying to play some kind of political game.
Yes.
Because quite frankly, there is so much that is, you know, even the OBR has said, you know, everything is shifting and moving. It's a very unpredictable economic climate at the moment. And, you know, into that we have to factor this horrendous possibility that inflation could be as high as 8%. And as far as actually we're all concerned, your point about the petrol goes to the heart of it. Actually, inflation seems to be at least 8% already.
Yeah, higher, if anything. And also, let's be honest, he's got to get fracking. He's got to tell Boris, we've got to do it. And he's got to drop net zero for a year or two. He's just got to do it. Because ordinary people don't give anything about, you know, putting up, you know, what do you call them, wind generators or putting up solar panels. They're just worried about heating their house and feeding their kids.
Well, also, the United Kingdom, you know, is responsible for about 1% of the actual
But we're responsible for the whole world.
So
well, he
needs to consider what that's doing.
He could do a lot worse. If he's worried about the politics of it, he should really concentrate on the priorities of those people that really got him and Boris elected in the so-called Red Wall. Have a look at what their priorities are and then base your policies on that, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I again come back to what we were talking about earlier, that I think there's a detachment with them. They're not thinking straight. Fancy saying, oh, we're going to give 5 pence increase on fuel, but there didn't seem to be anything to force those companies to actually do it. So it's almost like they're expecting some gentlemanly gesture for this to happen. And I didn't really. So now they're urging these companies to do it. And I'm like, well, why did you give the benefit to the big energy company owner, even though, and it turns out in actual fact he couldn't initiate it in the day he said he could do it anyway. So I think there's a detachment in
I think that detachment is there because of the Red Wall. You know, he got an 80-seat majority. They're living off that. He's come through COVID okay. The Partygate thing will disappear now. And I think they're overconfident. You know, they think he's doing a good job with the Ukraine crisis, which I guess we've got to say he is. But I always said he's like, you can't remove Boris. He's a superstar. He's a rock star of politics. But I think he's beginning to get tarnished. And as I keep saying, it's only because there isn't a proper opposition. Well, but if he doesn't help the Red Wall, if he doesn't help the working class, he's finished.
But the Labour Party is saying that actually his plans prioritise those who've been swindling the taxpayer. And in a way, I mean, you know, not that energy companies or anyone has in particular, but these people have already benefited, you know, and things like a loan that we pay later, and then they're going to pay something to the energy companies to do this and that. It just doesn't really work for me. But listen, let's talk to you, because the show's nothing without you and your thoughts. Let's welcome our great British voice. It's your opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Jonathan Jones is from Cornwall. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. Right, he's Jonathan with his Tregarson tea, if I said it right.
Yeah, good tea.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about this. I mean, look, do you think there's any element within Rishi Sunak's budget that you listen to his spring statement that he should really be U-turning on?
I don't think he can U-turn. I'm not sure where there's no wiggle room for him. I think we're just going to have to accept fuel prices are a real pain. It's going to hit farming really badly. That will hit food prices. I've got breaking news for the UK. Tea prices are going to have to go up. The national drink will get more expensive, but so will all food and drink. So we're going to have to get a lot savvier, and I think find ways of incremental savings, because it is a global problem. It isn't just actually a UK problem, but there's something in his favour in that the sun has come out. Heating bills won't actually become more painful until the autumn, and by then Boris's luck might just come in. Who knows? There might be something that comes along in his favour. There could be only a year ago, people were almost paying you to put fuel in your tank. So, things can change quite quickly. And all I can say to people is buy better tea and squeeze your tea bags and everything will be fine.
Yeah, or reuse the bag. Thank you, Jonathan. Really good to talk.
Reuse the bag.
Jonathan Jones, he's there in Cornwall. So today I was asking, should Rishi Sunak U-turn on his spring statement? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Ian says, not so much U-turn, but more rip it up and start again. I know. I just kept listening and listening to see when he was going to talk about national insurance and tell us that he wasn't going to do that, but he did it. Bill says, U-turn, no, add to it. Yes, must increase benefits immediately or Rishi is condemning the poor. Yep, DB says he needs to ask himself why he wanted to be an MP. If it was to help people, I'm afraid he's failing. And Clem says definitely should be looked at again. We can afford to send missiles to Ukraine, and whatever else has been sent, we should be put on the front at the front of the queue. That is an interesting perspective and something that you make a good point of, actually. Well, listen, keep your thoughts coming. You know what to do. It's at GB News, or you can send me the email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, this is something that's been in the press recently. The Chief Medical Officer for England, Chris Whitty, has warned that children's lives could be cut short because of the significant increase in obesity rates. Now, the thing is, I don't really see many obese children. I don't know where they go if there's so many of them, because figures out actually suggest that around about 28% of children in England are overweight or obese by the time they start school. That's up from 23% before the start of the coronavirus pandemic. So what can we do to get our kids in shape? And is it local authorities, children themselves, or maybe even parents who are to blame for this? So joining me to discuss this is the chef and author, better known as the Inspired Diabetic, Lyndon Wissart. Lyndon, thank you for joining me. Where is Lyndon? Oh, there you are.
Hi, Nan, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, Lyndon. So, look, they're saying about lots of obese kids. I haven't seen many, but apparently this is something that's big is happening. What do you think that the reason is for this childhood obesity? Who do you blame?
I think with obesity, it starts from the home. I personally believe from home, from what the parents are actually feeding their children. And I think parents have to look at what they're feeding them and why they're feeding them certain foods at the same time. So I think it's education from the home, because for me personally, I started cooking from the home, from vegetables in my mother's garden, from scallion, which is a spring onion. And I learned basic things like that, how to cut an onion, how to cut a pepper, and just eating it raw and just finding out about little things like that. And it doesn't take much time or effort to do that. So the obesity thing, I don't see it like you said. I don't really see it either.
Yeah, but Lyndon, but Lyndon, wasn't part of the problem that you were actually obese yourself? I mean, as an adult, as a child, you've gone through how you kind of, ate things and learnt how to cook things and stuff. But were you overweight as a child?
Not as a child. I was looking at one of my pictures the other day, school pictures, basketball. I was skinny. Back then, when I was at school, I'd done basketball, football, tennis. At our school, we've done so many activities. In the playground, we always played football. We played rounders. There's so many things that we've done during our lunch breaks, afternoon breaks as well. So I think we have to be conscious, number one, about what we're putting in our mouths, and number two, be conscious of how much exercise we're actually doing. And we also need to drink a lot more water. And a lot of people, they're afraid of drinking just plain water. So I'm saying to add some fresh lemon or fresh lime to the water, add a cucumber to the water, because these things helps with the body as well. And if a child knows, if I'm going to have a cucumber, it's going to hydrate me, it's going to help my brain function better, give them the reason to eat a fruit or vegetables which they may not like.
Well, some of the things you just said there in terms of the school playgrounds and used to play a lot and stuff. I mean, a lot of these schools don't have so much space now, and a lot of the sports that people used to do, they've all been marginalised. So, in very briefly, because we've got about 10 seconds, Do you think that there should be a punishment for parents who allow their kids to become overweight?
I don't think it's a punishment, but more of an education for the parents, and not the parents not to be frightened to give their children more fruit, more vegetables, drink more water, and encourage them in that sense. And even at home, you can do exercise at home. Don't be afraid, because my daughter's 18 and she's a vegetarian now, and that's because of my lifestyle, which I changed. That is.
Well, listen. Thank you so much for your view, Lyndon. It's really good to talk to you. That's Lyndon Wissart. He's the author of a book called The Inspired Diabetic. Really good to talk to you. So I've got my panel with me, broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Very, very briefly, before we go on to our little quick fires. Joanne, do you think that parents should be sort of blamed and punished in a sense for their children being obese?
I'm not sure that that's a particularly constructive way to go about resolving.
Well,
it's quite a complicated situation.
But they punish parents sort of if you miss days of school and things like that, and parents are often the ones who are in trouble for that. So what you know?
Well, yes, but that doesn't always work particularly well either. I mean, if you're talking about a child who'd been allowed to become clinically obese to the point of it actually creating serious health problems, then, you know, perhaps there is a role then for local authorities or schools to be involved with the parents. But I think it's about creating, you know, a better understanding of what is healthy. What I would very much say, though, I think it's very tough on kids that are prone to being overweight. If they put on weight as a child, it then becomes so much more difficult to lose weight in later life.
It all comes down to education. We need to educate parents. We've got a whole generation, maybe 2 generations, who don't know how to...
that if you eat the wrong food...
Yeah, but they don't know how to cook, Nana. That's the difference. They've got to get back to basics, sorry to use that term, cook with real food, and we need to really crack down on, what do they call it, ultra-processed food, UPFs, not just, you know, the burger bars and the rest of it, the stuff in supermarkets. And I think, like Dr. Asim Malhotra says, if it's got more than 5 ingredients on the package, don't eat it.
But whose fault is it?
Make a stew.
Everything in moderation.
But ultimately, there's somebody's feeding you that food. So would you blame the parents, though, in that respect?
You're talking about going up against trillion-dollar food manufacturers' budgets. That's the fundamental problem. We need to do proper cooking in schools for boys and girls, teach them how to cook, and teach them that actually if you cook something properly yourself, you can't beat
teachers
it,
have got
and
far
it's
too much to
cheaper.
do.
There should be. There's home economics at the school that I went to. They should be taught.
I think teachers have got way too much to do as it is.
I'm not blaming the teachers.
No, I don't think... So whose fault? I mean, look, because let's be honest, let's be totally brutal about this, and because I've got moving on to our quickfire debates in a moment, but if we're totally brutal about it, you've got your children, whether you've learnt to cook or whether you haven't, what you're feeding them, irrespective of what your experience is, it's your fault in the end, isn't it? As long as they haven't got a situation...
It's your responsibility. It should fundamentally be the parents'
fault, you know, semantics.
Well, no, I don't think it is semantic, actually, because I think what we're saying is that, you know, we're trying to kind of encourage and create an environment in which people can be more constructive. But it's not just food, is it? It's the input and the output. So it's the exercise as much as
too much input.
She'd have everyone locked up in fat camps.
I'll wire my kids' jaws together if they do too much. I'm not having fat kids. No, I'm joking.
You're so liberal.
I'm teasing you. No, I wouldn't obviously do that. Not without a good reason. Joking. Right, it's time for my quickfire debates, the part of the show where we talk about some of the other stories that have hit the headlines. And joining me on my panel today, if you've just tuned in, it's broadcaster John Gaunt and Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler. Right, let's start with this. A Jet 2 flight to Turkey was forced to land in Austria after a passenger allegedly slapped other passengers and squared up to fight attendants. The woman, who was on her way to have her teeth whitened, apparently, I knew you were thinking, was apparently angered by babies crying on the flight. She was slapped with a lifetime ban from the airline and fined £5,000 for her antics. Now, do you think that was a strong enough punishment? £5,000?
No, when you said she was slapped, I think she should have been slapped by the security. You know, and now the problem is people saying, oh, we should ban drinking in airports. I was talking to your producer earlier. There's nothing better than when you're going on a holiday, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning at Birmingham Airport, having a pint of beer. It's part of wine.
Oh, I love that.
Part of
the holiday.
Do you know what he said? Oh, no, don't do that. It made me feel sick. That's Alex, the producer.
Yeah,
So
I'm with
what they
Alex
want
on
to
that.
do now, they want to stop us all having a drink.
Well, I think Joanne would probably agree with that. You shouldn't be drinking at that. What do you say?
Well, I mean, I have to say I wouldn't be yearning for a beer at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I suppose it depends what point you are in the.
You're not coming to Benidorm with me then.
In the international.
You're off the list.
Oh my goodness, I'm devastated. I have to change all my plans.
Devastating. Yeah. Joanne Nadler will not be going on holiday with John Gaunt.
You can come because you're a party
Lucky
animal.
me. Yeah. Do you think? Oh, strong enough punishment. Do you think it was? Yes. No.
Well, it sounds like she may. I mean, £5,000 by the airline, and the airline banning her. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But if it was an assault, maybe the law order needs
All right,
to be
quickly
involved.
then, we'll move on. Celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay has been criticised by residents of Cornwall after he said he loves the country but can't stand the Cornish. He made the comments on a radio show hosted by Vernon Kay, and when questioned on it, he said, "I promise, I did mean it." I love Gordon Ramsay. I think he's great. Isn't he great?
Yeah, I think he's fine. I don't think it was racist or regionalist or whatever. I mean, what do they call us? Gockles or grockles if you don't live in Cornwall but you go down there on holiday? Even though without us they'd have no economy. So it's just banter. No, it's just a laugh, isn't it?
What do you think, Joanne?
We need more of that.
I mean, it was rude, but he's owned it. So, I suppose the question was it a hate crime? Well, obviously not. I mean, it doesn't fulfil the criteria of a hate crime within the law or within any realm of common sense.
Oh, yeah, common sense.
And it sounds like he was having a laugh. Gordon Ramsay is great, isn't he? I love his show. I love his show. So, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, should Chancellor Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on his spring statement? And according to our Twitter poll, take a guess at home. What do you think? Yes, you're right. 81% of you say yes, and 19% of you say no. Yes, he should absolutely do a U-turn, but we shall wait with bated breath to see if he actually does anything of that nature. Well, listen, it's been very nice to see you. Haven't seen you for a while, John. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Have you enjoyed it?
I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah. Do you know that top makes me feel hungry? I feel like I need to eat some pineapples. Joanne, thank you so much for joining me as well.
My pleasure.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much to you at home for watching as well. Listen, I will be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Make sure you join me. We've got so much going on. On the way next, it's Dubes & Co. Have a fabulous day. Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your weather. And if you like dry, warm and sunny weather, we've got plenty more of that to come as we go through this weekend. Now, the reason for that is high pressure, firmly in charge of our weather. It's sat across the map and it's not going anywhere very quickly over the next few days. Certainly through the rest of Friday and into the weekend, this high pressure will be holding on, bringing with it very light winds as well. So through the rest of this evening, plenty of sunshine to enjoy to end the day, and then clear skies for most of us overnight will mean it will turn quite chilly in places. We have got some mist and fog patches forming in some spots, and there will be some wet weather affecting Shetland, but away from that, it's largely clear skies and temperatures plummeting down. So we will see a touch of frost as we start the day on Saturday, but that does mean we'll be compensated with plenty of blue skies. And it's a sunny start to the day and a sunny day throughout for most places. We will have a bit more of a breeze just across that southeast corner, making it feel just a little bit fresher than perhaps it has done through Friday. And we continue to see some cloud affecting the far north and northeast of Scotland, but by and large it's a fine day for most places. And look at these temperatures. We should be around 12 for this time of year, so to get 19 or 20 is pretty warm indeed. Now, through Saturday evening, a few bits and pieces of cloud will float around at times, but for most places it stays dry and clear. Notice this mass of cloud, though, across the North Sea. That's low cloud and fog, and that'll start to drift its way in across eastern areas, turning things grey and misty as we start Sunday morning. So a bit of a different feel here, but still clear skies out to the west and still the risk of some frost first thing on Sunday. Through Sunday then, a bit of a different picture across eastern areas of England, eastern Scotland as well. Much more cloud